Hi everyone, I'm Gina K from Gina K Designs and your host of Stamp TV. And today on Stamp TV, I'm going to show you how I like to color one of the flowers from the new Hearts and Flowers Stamp TV kit. Let me show you the tools and products you're going to need to make this card project. First, you're going to need some stamps, and I'm using the Tropical Flower stamp set, and I'm going to be using this large flower image. Then for a greeting, you can use any greeting you want. I'm going to use one from the new incentive set called You Get Me, so I'm going to use one of these. For ink, you're going to need some Versamark ink, and along with that, you're going to need an embossing magic pad or some sort of anti-static tool. I'm also going to use my Mini Misty. For cardstock, I have a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock, and you can use either the very textured side or you can use the smoother side. And for this card, I'm going to use the smoother side. I'm also going to need some adhesive, so I'm using the ThermoWeb tape runner. This is their little sticky dot runner. I've got some white embossing powder here. I also have a heat tool. I have a Tim Holtz Distress sprayer. I have a water brush, and I do have some water in it. This is the Gina K Designs water brush. I'm using the smaller one, but you can use either one. And then I'm going to use some Zig markers, and the colors that I'm going to use are mid-green, ochre, bright yellow, and red. So those are the colors I'm going to watercolor with today. Alright, so to begin, I'm going to start with my Mini Misty, and I'm going to put this piece of cardstock into the Mini Misty. So I'm going to flip this around this way because my cardstock, my image is going to kind of come off the side of the cardstock here, so I need it to be a little bit bigger. If you have the original Misty, you won't have that issue, but the Mini Misty is great for travel and it's great for quick and easy projects. Alright, so I'm going to grab my flower stamp out of here. You can see that I have been playing with this stamp a lot, and it is very stained in black because I have been testing out some India ink that I am having a lot of fun with. So that is something new that's going to be coming to Gina K Designs, and you can watercolor over India ink really well. So that's a new item coming, and you can see it does stain your stamps, but that's not so bad because it allows you to see exactly where they are and if something is straight or not, and it doesn't transfer ink, which I like. Okay, so now I'm going to ink this up with some Versamark. This might make it transfer a little bit, although it hasn't put any black onto my Versamark pad. My Versamark pad is old and dirty anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, and now I'm going to stamp this image down onto my cardstock. Now for this card, I'm going to use white embossing powder, but then I'm going to show you a sample that I did using the gold embossing powder. Either way, the technique is the same. Okay, so that doesn't look like it transferred any ink at all as far as the black goes. Now I'm going to grab my embossing powder, and for colors of embossing powder that I use a ton, I like to, put a few jars into one of these Glad containers, and that really makes it easy to get the embossing powder on your image without too much cleanup. Okay, and then sometimes I'll just tap it off the end of my desk just to remove any little spots that are on there. Alright, so now it's time to emboss, and I'm going to heat up my embossing tool for just a second, because if you heat it up first, your paper is much less apt to warp. It melts the powder very quickly. Alright, and now you can see that it's melting. This might be difficult to see on the screen, but I'll turn it a little bit so you can see the shine. And you want to make sure that's nice and melted. Okay. So now let me turn this here and see if you can see that image there, right? Yeah, I can see it on my monitor. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and then I'm going to grab this red Zig marker, and I'm also going to grab my water brush. Now I like to put a little bit of water down first onto the image before I actually start to watercolor. And that just helps the image move. And you can see I was making this card a lot yesterday, so I'm actually adding a very little bit of light pink on this flower, and that's okay. I didn't clean my brush very well because I knew that I was going to be making the same card again, and so it didn't really matter if some of that color was still on there. Okay. So there, I've added a little bit of water. You can see that very lightly shaded. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the red marker, and I'm going to just use kind of a flicking motion and just flick that color up along the bottom of that petal. And I'm going to do that along the bottom of all these petals. You can see that it's just traveling a little bit, that color. This one kind of goes down. And you can add a little bit of water if you want to see some movement. And that just softens it a little bit. And it's fun because I love these Zig markers because you really don't have to know what you're doing to make it look good. I think one of the keys is embossing first, because I'm not very skilled at watercoloring and getting it all in the lines exactly the way I want it. But when you have those embossed lines, it kind of helps the water stay within the image, and so you don't have to worry too much about where the water's going. So now I'm going to take the yellow and I'm going to add some of that into the mix. Kind of blending those two colors together. So you can see how that is changing the whole look. And you can even let it go to white if you don't want to go all the way to the edge. You can really thin it out. And just let that color kind of almost go to no color at all. But when you move it with the water brush, it's definitely going to blend. That's so pretty. I'm adding a little water there. Add that there. So each time you touch the ink, it kind of reactivates again. I guess reactivate is again. So it reactivates and it allows you to blend again, which is really nice. I don't get that same kind of look with just regular water-based markers as I can with these Zigs. Let's go to the yellow one next here. Bring some of that color in. And then I'm going to play with the water brush again. And just blending it all together. And don't worry if like some of the petals are more orange and some of the petals are more yellow. That just adds to it. I love that look. Okay, so this one I'm just going to add a little bit here. Just down along the bases. And you start to see the lines getting more and more defined as you continue on with the flower. In the beginning it kind of looks like, oh, what is this going to end up like? But then as you keep going and you keep adding color, you start to see how it's going to look. Add a little water in there. It's so fun. And anywhere that there's embossing powder, your color isn't going to stick to it. So once it's all done, you can even take a little piece of paper towel or something and just blot off anything that's on top of the embossing powder, anything that pooled up on there. I'm adding that yellow again. And then I'll show you what I'll do up at the top of these flowers. Just adding that water makes a huge difference. You can see that design is really starting to glow. Sometimes I'll just move the water over a little bit, and you can see how that just kind of fills in those little things, those little petals, those detail ones. And then you can go back and add some of the darker red in there. All right. So add a tiny bit here down at the bottom of each of these. So you can see how easy this is, even from somebody that really doesn't do a lot of watercoloring. Somebody asked me on Facebook what my favorite way to color is. That's really hard for me. My natural answer would be colored pencils first, and then Copic markers, and then watercolor last, because I don't feel like I'm very good at it. But with these Zig markers and the embossing powder, it does make you look a lot better at it. So you can take a look at that. All that color there. And even if you go outside the lines, you can really clean off your brush. I'm just going to clean off this brush. And you can see I went outside the line here, so I'm just going to add some water into that. And then you can grab a piece of paper towel or something that will blot up water, and you can get rid of that mark, because watercolor keeps reactivating when you put more water on it. All right, so I'm going to color this little rose here, and I probably won't color that last one. I'll just show you in my card sample how I did that, because you probably don't want to watch me color this whole thing. I don't know, maybe you do. Maybe it's fun to watch somebody who doesn't know what they're doing make it work. See, and I would just take a little rag and just kind of blot that up. And then I'm going to add some of that yellow in there. That is so nice. And if you don't feel like it's red enough, you can always go back and add a little more. And if your markers ever stop working, sometimes it's just because they're really wet. So just dab it on an extra piece of paper, and then that color starts to flow again, and you'll get more of that darker, deeper color. Okay. Maybe I'll color the last one. All right, I'm going to add a little water to this. This is getting kind of dry. It's a lot more fun to watch it move when there's water on it first. Isn't that fun? You can just see it travel. You get to see all the outlines of the lines coming through. And if you just want to stick with one color, you don't have to add that yellow in, then you can see you get a lot more pink that way. But when you mix that yellow back in, I'm going to dab this a little, take out a little bit of the water. But when you add that yellow in there, then the whole thing starts to look more orangey. And that's pretty too. I'll use the water brush and move a little bit of that around. And then I'll go back and add some of the red in there. It just kind of flows and does the work for you. So there are 3 flowers colored. Now I'm going to color the leaves, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to make sure I rub off some of that pink, but I'm going to just wet them a little. You can see there's some leaf areas coming off of these flowers too that you definitely want to make sure that you get some green on. And I really wasn't sure what to do with the stems, but I was actually having a really fun Instagram video conversation back and forth with Kathy Zielski, and she and I were talking about it, and I said, I'm not really sure what to do here. And we ended up deciding that just to just go along the line, and it just bleeds right outside that white line, and that looked pretty good. So thanks, Kathy, for helping me with that, if you're watching this video. Okay, so you can see I just added a little bit of green in there to add some detail. Add some in here. These are pretty wet. All right, now I'm going to go back with that ochre, and this is kind of more of a yellow. Just going to add some along the edges, and we'll blend those together with water. I like to use two colors, although if you only use one, it really does look pretty. But two colors, that kind of gives it a little extra. There we go. So you can see how easy this is. It really isn't difficult at all. Just practice a little bit on images that you've embossed first, and you'll just see how the water flows all in there and kind of does the work for you. So now what I was saying is these lines here, they're very hard to see. You can probably see them. If I turn, you'll see the shine of the stems. But there's no little dots in the stems or anything. So what I did was I just went right on the line and just kind of let it bleed outside the line a little bit, like that. And that just connected everything together. Just want to do it very lightly. It kind of accents the white in the center. You can also do that to these areas if you want. There are some pretty little areas on this flower up here that you really can't see unless you kind of turn it a bit, because then you see the glossy. But it's a nice way to highlight it just by adding a little bit of that green. Do that up here too. And I'm actually coloring right on the embossed part, and it's just jumping off the side ever so lightly. Let's do a little bit more here, and then we'll add the greeting. Okay, so there's my colored rose. See how that looks. Now it's time to add a greeting. So I think what I'm going to choose is, I like to hold them up and see what looks good. You're my person. I love that saying because that reminds me of Grey's Anatomy. You're so kind. That's always a good one. I always want to send thank you cards. So I think I'll use You're So Kind. I can never have enough thank you cards because there's so many wonderful, nice people in my life. All right. I'm going to get rid of this stamp, and we're going to put this back into the MISTI, and we'll hold it down using the magnets. I'm waiting for a new magnet to come. I had two really nice bar magnets, and I let them get too close to one another, and they jumped into each other, and they both broke. So I'm waiting for my new magnets to come. So I'm going to use some Memento Tuxedo Black here. ink that up, and that looks nice. All right, so there's that watercolored piece. And now it's time to assemble the card. So what I have here is a piece of black cardstock, and I also have a card base made out of lipstick. And I thought that really played up nicely with those colors from the Zig markers. And so one thing I want to do is I want to take a piece of paper towel. I just want to dab over that lightly because I want to remove anything that's laying on that embossing powder so I don't smear anything. All right, and now I'm going to tape this onto the black piece. And then the whole thing is going to go onto my lipstick card base. Now if you take a look at this card, this is not an A2 card. This is a little bit smaller than an A2 card. I cut the piece of watercolor cardstock down because I just felt like this image and greeting were more balanced if it was a little bit of a smaller card. But that doesn't matter because you can see here I have an A2 envelope and I have my sample card in here. It still fits really nicely. So there's no problem with that at all, fitting it into an A2 card or an A2 envelope. So there are two finished cards using the same stamp set and the same technique. Now I want to show you another card that I had done earlier, and I had posted that on some of my social media. Here I used gold embossing powder to do the same thing, so you can see the shine there of the gold. But it has a different look. It's more, I don't know, maybe more Victorian looking. It's just more, especially because I used the textured side of the cardstock. So it just has a little bit of a different look, but the technique is exactly the same. So all you have to do is flip that Tim Holtz cardstock over, use the textured part, and emboss with gold or silver, and it gives you a completely different look. This glows a little bit more because of the white lines. So those are my finished card projects. I hope you've enjoyed today's Stamp TV video. Stay tuned to Stamp TV for more projects featuring the Hearts and Flowers Stamp TV kit, and thanks so much for watching.